This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
What's going on, people? It is Monday, October 18th, and you are currently tuned in to the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. This is the pro wrestling podcast where each Monday and Friday we bring you recaps and news coverage from AEW, WWE, NXT, NWA, and, tacked onto that bulletin right now is also New Japan, as we wrap up the finals of the G1 later this week. For those of you checking out the show for the first time, just to give you a very brief rundown of the channel format, Monday's show is typically dedicated to recapping AEW Rampage, NWA Powerrr, and any weekend pay-per-view events or news stories that are atop the peak discussion board. And Friday's show is typically the recap show for NXT TV and AEW Dynamite. And included in both of those recap shows right now is the coverage of the G1 Climax, which, as I noted, wraps up later this week. So you're kind of getting a little bit of everything when it comes to this show right now. Now, of course, things are a little wonky the next couple weeks with Dynamite being on Saturday, so it is going to be a little bit different of the format for the next few shows here, but once we get back to the regular format and we finish up the G1, I will get back to the old formula of running the shows. I also have some ideas running through my head about probable substitutes just in case I end up dropping NXT from the recap shows altogether. Kind of hinted at it before, and judging how the shows have been going lately, I may want to hedge my bets and try a different route. Because I will say this, Rex Steiner alone cannot save that colossal waste of a 2-hour investment every week. And of course, as I will always mention here, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the show down below for me. Commenting being the most important thing you can probably do. Subs do not mean a whole lot on YouTube in 2021, so if y'all can do me a solid and just comment, be helping me out big time in the algorithms. And also, make sure you guys go over to www.chairshot.com and check out my article content. I write opinion pieces each week, or I guess blogging would be a better way to put it. I used to put out about 3 or 4 articles a week and kind of gotten sidetracked with trying to balance out a couple other things in my life, so haven't necessarily been plunking them out like crazy, but I do highly encourage you to go over and, check out the content whenever you can. Links for my most recent publications will always be in the description, and they are not lengthy pieces at all, between 600 and 1,000 words usually, so you never feel like you have to go out of your way to read a book or anything. Also in the description will always be the link in case you guys want to check out the show on Rumble. If you just want a secondary platform to catch the shows on, you can always head over and watch them there. And I think that's it for the plugs. So, with Dynamite being on Saturday next week too, I think what I'll do is I'll cover both AEW shows, starting with Rampage, knock that show out. I'll cover AEW Dynamite right after that, and then I will cap things off with NWA Powerrr at the very end. And at least that way, if you aren't, all that interested in the Powerrr reports, you can hear my AEW ranting and then sign off right after. So without further ado, let's get going here with Rampage from Friday night. That'd be the October 15th, 2021 edition. Now, there was a buy-in deal that they ran on YouTube before they went live, and initially I did not watch it, But when I found out that they booked a Bryan Danielson Minoru Suzuki match, I ended up checking it out just out of sheer intrigue. Suzuki's always been one of my favorite guys to watch in New Japan. His AEW run has been less than stellar, to put it candidly. However, Danielson wrestles a similar style. There was not any furniture involved here. Figured I'd be pleasantly surprised by it. And, well, it definitely felt like a traditional Minoru Suzuki match. Lots of back and forth with tradings of the forearms, shots, and kicks, which, I know is not everyone's cup of tea in pro wrestling. I have always been of the opinion that if it looks good, if they don't make it clearly apparent that they're cooperating with one another and it's at least semi-believable in execution, I'm okay with it. And I think the best comparison I can make to explain that difference is what I saw Suzuki do here with Danielson versus what I saw Suzuki do with Jon Moxley. Whenever Suzuki and Moxley would do those forearm exchanges, it always looked fake, it always looked bad, and it always just made me fart at it every time I saw it. This match is a good model of how you execute this kind of ring style. And again, yes, I know the idea seems kind of ridiculous on the surface, Why would you let your opponent willingly hit you in the face or kick you in the chest just so you can hulk up and fire back? Truthfully, I never really understood it. I was just more willing to accept it if it fit the narrative of the match and, made sense in the context of what they were doing. And, they pretty much worked the match as both guys being evenly matched and spent the entire time trying to find various means to gain control. It ended up coming down to both guys having one last big slug exchange. They kind of went back and forth for a couple of minutes with one guy getting grounded, teasing he was knocked out, but then he would fire back up and they'd go back to the blow exchange. Wow, that sounded really wrong on the surface. And finally, Suzuki tried for the sleeper into the Gotch piledriver combo, but Danielson reversed it into a back body drop, sprang off the ropes for the running knee, and eventually got the pin on Suzuki. Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it. I don't know if I'd mark it down as like a match of the year contender or anything, but I'll say this. What I appreciated about it is that I finally got to see an old-fashioned Minoru Suzuki match, and I haven't really seen that out of him with anything he's done in AEW so far. And at least when they were doing the stiff exchanges with one another here, they sold it to make it look believable. They weren't paintbrushing one another. There wasn't any period where you blatantly saw they weren't making contact. It looked legit. Now, that said, why this match wasn't scheduled for the live show, I have no fucking clue. Guess it was absolutely crucial we had to see Ruby Soho wrestle the fucking bunny, but Danielson and Suzuki, nah man, those guys got to take a back seat on this one. Couldn't make the cut. And maybe that's another reason I couldn't rank this higher than others may have after watching it. For my money, I would have shifted something around on the live show. Either put the women's match on the pre-show, or, God forbid, if you feel justified to keep it on the live show to virtue signal to all the women's rights activists out there, swap out the six-man tag that main evented the show and have that be the closer to the pre-show. And then you can stick Danielson versus Suzuki in the main event. I don't know. Just my opinion. Anyway, transitioning to the live show, first match of the night was Matt Seidel versus CM Punk, which, well, they set up last week on Rampage with something involving Lio Rush and pretty much drew no attention to it here. No Lio appearance, no video pre-tape to recap the story, nothing. So if you didn't watch last week's show, you're probably just going in thinking, oh cool, Seidel versus Punk. Should be a good exhibition showcase. And it was a very good back and forth match, I thought. There was actually a spot early on in the match where Punk was doing a series of body slams on Seidel and actually got the crowd behind it, which was kind of amusing. And, of course, when Seidel reversed the final body slam attempt, they all booed. Like I said, though, a lot of back and forth action. Both guys traded a series of submissions at the end. Seidel ended up hitting the lightning spiral for a near fall. Goes up for the big move, but Punk moves out of the way. Seidel goes for a crucifix, but Punk snatches Seidel up onto his shoulders and hits the GTS for the 3. Good finish there. And I didn't mention this, but I actually kind of liked Excalibur bringing up their history too. And talking about how they had something like 4 or 5 matches, and Punk's beating Seidel in all of them. Poor Matt. And I think this was good for Punk. You know, he's working some longer matches now. He's going up against guys with higher cardio levels and ring capability, which is actually testing Punk to an extent. So I like the idea of him going in longer matches and seeing guys be more competitive with him the longer the matches go. It basically plants the idea that Punk still got some ring rust to work off, and you know it'll take time before that cardio kicks back into where it was, you know, say 7 or 8 years ago. So, yeah, very good start to the show. It was definitely a good cleanser before we got to this Ruby Soho bunny match. The best thing about this entire segment was Taz managing to fuck up the chorus of Ruby's theme song. And the chorus is literally Destination Unknown, Ruby, 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 Soho. He couldn't get it. To be fair, the match was actually not as bad as I thought it would be going in. Granted, I set the bar pretty low beforehand, but it was not Ty Conti, Penelope Ford, Anna Jay level bad. Can't say I particularly like the idea of Ruby winning with a backslide pin, but you take what you can get, right? And speaking of Penelope, she ended up jumping Ruby after the bell and knocking her out with brass knucks. So in other words, I will eventually be subjected to another Penelope Ford match on the program. Oh, and hey, imagine that. I did, because I watched Dynamite the next day. Fantastic. And as I alluded to earlier, the main event for the night was this 6-man tag with Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, and Sammy Guevara versus Scorpio Sky, Ethan Page, and Junior Dos Santos. And to be honest, I really don't have a whole lot to say about it. It was a match. Not devoid of stupidity, of course. A prime example of this being the ridiculous visual of watching Jericho try to go punch for punch with a trained certified MMA professional. To say that it looked fake is barely even scratching the surface of how ludicrous it was. Heels end up gaining control after Page jumps Jericho on the outside. Guevara ended up getting hot tag and running wild. And of course things immediately descended into chaos to the point where, I just kind of stopped taking notes because it was too much shit to keep track of. All I remember is that there was a spot where Hager put Dos Santos through a table on the outside, and basically those guys were left dead. I think Sammy hit some kind of dive that the camera totally missed, which, amateur hour, what do you expect? And somehow the one chick, I didn't even write her name down here. It's somewhere else in my notes, but I'm not going to scroll through it right now. The female that always comes out with Top Team. She hopped the guardrail and took Aubrey on the apron. Oh, and yes, Aubrey was the referee here, folks. Yes, assigning a female referee to officiate a match involving trained male mixed martial arts fighters. Sounds like a genius idea if something were to go horribly awry. And while Aubrey had her back turned, the other guy, Masvidal, I think it is, he ran in and hit Jericho with a running knee shot to the head and knocked him out cold so that Scorpio could pin him. And again, I have to wonder why they couldn't just book this on the YouTube show. It really didn't feel suited for the main event, and the match generally wasn't even all that good, if I'm being honest. And I guess the other thing, too, is I'm still not really that sold on the idea of this feud. Hager at least has some MMA training under his belt, but he's had 3 or 4 fights. And everyone else on the Inner Circle team have 0 shoot fighting experience. So how exactly do you book a credible program when the babyface's opposition is an entire swarm of shoot MMA fighters? I don't know, I could at least buy the feud if the Inner Circle hired some fighters to back them in their corner. At least that way it would be some kind of fair fight. I guess the program is still early in development, so I'm sure that'll eventually be the plan to incorporate, some MMA fighters on the babyface team, but yeah, this feud is really one-sided right now. I mean, at least it favors the heels right now, but Inner Circle could use some backup. Overall, I don't know, man. This kind of felt like a buffer show. We did have 2 very enjoyable matches, so I won't say I didn't like the show. I probably would have shuffled around the card a little differently to get Suzuki and Danielson on the live show instead of the buy-in. At least we got in some kind of update with the Full Gear card. Granted, it was more of a leak than anything else on Tony Khan's part, and they didn't show graphics for anything. But we are getting Hangman Adam Page versus Kenny Omega for the AEW World Championship. Still nothing announced for Bryan Danielson or CM Punk yet. Time's a-ticking, guys. Anyway, from one outhouse to the other, let's recap Dynamite from the following night. This shouldn't take long. Looks like they've got a formula here with CM Punk and AEW, though. Wrestle a match on Rampage, do commentary on Dynamite, maybe cut the occasional promo in Seg 2, and remain one of the highest paid talents in the company. What a gig. The first match of the night was Malachi Black versus Dante Martin, and they had a match. Not really sure if it was the right kind of match, particularly for Malachi. I don't really think he's had enough matches yet to warrant the amount of selling he was doing here, especially with a guy like Dante Martin. And I like Dante and all, but I really don't think he should be this competitive with a guy like Black right now. And generally, I really didn't think the match was all that good. They did pick things up a little bit as the match went along, but then it just kind of ended up turning into one of those PWG deals where, one guy hits a move, the other guy hits a move, and it's just back and forth, and neither guy has any real form of control of the match. Especially at the end where, Malachi hits a really nice-looking German, but then less than 30 seconds later, Dante's giving Black a top rope Rana, and then 30 seconds after that, Black comes back with a crab hold. All the while I'm sitting there did I miss 2 minutes of selling? Anyway, the finish here was Dante going for a springboard move. Black moves out of the way. Dante lands awkwardly for a minute, turns around and gets hit with the Black Mass for the 3. Like I said, it was a match, and honestly, in a rarity where I think an afterbirth may have actually been needed here for story development, the segment just kind of ends with Black leaving and I guess showing a moderate sign of respect for Dante. Oh yeah, and if it matters any, Dante Martin is just affiliated with Leo Rush now. Great. We had a backstage deal with Jurassic Express trying to do a promo, but getting jumped by the Elite Dorks. And this actually sparked an idea for me to play a drinking game. If I had any desire to drink, which I don't. But if you all are on board with the idea, I highly encourage you to take a shot for every AEW backstage skit that ends with dudes or chicks getting into brawls. And while you're at it, have a milk thistle extract supplement to control your liver from exploding. And speaking of the Elite, it was not until about 5 seconds before they cut away here, not only did I recognize that Adam Cole was there, but I actually got legitimately sad at the thought of realizing that Cole has been with AEW for a literal piss break, and he is already just another guy. But honestly, did you expect anything differently? So then we had the Inner Circle come out for an attempted promo segment. Another drinking game for you, actually. Take a shot every time someone tries to cut a promo in the ring but gets cut off by someone else. And lo and behold, here it happened with American Top Team coming out. And Lambert didn't get too far into his spiel when Jericho interrupted him. By the way, I don't know how he does it, but somehow Lambert can literally screech his way through promos and barely survive not cracking his voice. Gotta respect that. And for a guy like me that can barely get through these damn podcasts while I haven't taken a drink of water every 5 seconds, Lambert can fucking howl at the moon and he's good to go. And Jericho's promo was a promo. The back and forth with him and Paige, that was her name, the one that I couldn't figure out earlier. Yeah, Paige Van Zandt. But Jericho going back and forth with her was actually pretty entertaining. I especially love the line where Jericho says that he wouldn't touch her with her husband's genitalia, and Punk nonchalantly goes, "Yeah, I think he would." But there really wasn't a whole lot to this aside from Lambert setting up an announcement for next week involving the Inner Circle and Top Team. Apparently he has some terms that need to be agreed upon for the rematch. Oh, shit, where's my William Regal drop? I don't have it queued up. I can do my best Regal impression. War Games. Probably not War Games. Although considering it is a fight involving MMA fighters, wouldn't War Games kind of make sense? I mean, I know they just did one like less than 4 months ago, but just saying. Then we had 2 green frog suited dudes straight out of Chikara versus the Lucha Bros for championships from another company that I could not possibly care about. Maybe the Jones conspiracy isn't wrong after all. And now we have finally found the culprit to the gay frog conspiracy. It's AEW that's making the frogs gay. I'm telling you. I thought it was fluoride, but I was wrong. Yeah, Crowder does it better. My Alex Jones voice just sounds like gargly Vince McMahon. And in the completely unpredictable plot twist here that not only did they spoil on commentary 2 minutes before, but that everyone in the building knew as soon as they came out with Andrade, the green-suited dweebs were revealed to be none other than FTR. And they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those meddling kids and AEW's dumbass fucking commentary team. Moving along here. Oh, and if you thought that I had any interest in watching this after the mask reveal, you obviously think I have a high threshold for stupidity. One of the greatest inventions ever established by mankind in the streaming world was the power of the fast forward button, and I exercise that tenfold here. And no, I do not care about FTR winning tag belts from another company, and I also do not care about Andrade paying off MJF to steal other companies' belts from the Lucha Bros. I will say this, though. I love how here in the land of opportunity that they call AEW, where guys finally get to come to showcase their skills and just be themselves, FTR, arguably the most gifted team in wrestling today, can only be featured on television under ski masks and Ninja Turtle outfits. You go figure that one out. Jon Moxley killed Wheeler Yuta in a completely pointless squash. I guess just to remind us that Jon Moxley still works for the company. I mean, he was the world champion at one point, if you actually can recall that. Serena Deeb tried to do a promo backstage, but got jumped by Shida. Drink. And twisting the knife even further into my spinal column, I got to watch the Beta Bucks work a match this week. Fucking phenomenal. They teamed with Adam Cole to wrestle the top 3 jobbers of the Dark Order. And I truly did not think that it would take this short a period of time for me to come to this conclusion, but I have officially reached 2016 Ring of Honor frustration with Adam Cole. So long as he's affiliated with anything involving the Bucks, I just can't get behind him. He's a talented wrestler, he's a great promo on his own, but as long as he continues to anchor himself down to the Bucks' level, it's just impossible to take anything he does seriously. In an ideal world, I would love to see him and Bryan Danielson work a program with each other. But, in order for that to happen, Cole has to ditch the betas and go it alone. And I just don't see that happening anytime soon. And by the way, why is the Dark Order still a thing? Can we just be done with this? It's been 2 years, guys. Christ. We had another bizarre pre-tape with Cody and Arn Anderson. They showed up at some training center to do drills. Arn ended up showing Cody some pictures of him and Dusty fighting, probably from 1986, which, I mean, yeah, with this audience, everyone fucking remembers the heated blood feud with the Horsemen and Dusty. Like they grew up in a completely different generation, appreciating a completely different style of wrestling. Guaranteed, just because I'm a dick, ask a random AEW fan when Dusty beat Arn for the TV title. Guarantee you, they won't know the place, the date, or the story behind it. And that is where we are with the state of professional wrestling today. Anyway, this was quite cinematic. In fact, it was right about on par with Lifetime drama movie cinema. Meaning that aside from Arn, the acting was hideous. And yes, I know they are doing the rubber match with him and Malachi next week. Actually, you can't even really call it a rubber match since Cody hasn't won a match in the series yet. But if I were a betting man, I would figure this is where Cody gets his win back. I really have no desire to see it. I really think Cody's trying to swim up Schitt's Creek here by camouflaging this artificial babyface role. And I don't have anything against Cody, man. I like Cody a lot. But, I'm also not going to try and refute that people are just not buying him as a good guy. I think he'd be a great heel if he could get out of his own head and just embrace the reaction. But I think he's got WWE syndrome with all this. He is so enthralled in pretending to be someone he's not that he would rather continue to go against the grain and ignore it than understand the reality he's in. He lives in the bizarro world that WWE always talks about. And to an extent, I understand why he does it. Especially with this new reality show, he's portrayed as the babyface on the program, so, for him to turn around and be a villain on AEW TV would kind of throw off the concept of everything. And that kind of delves into the rabbit hole argument of kayfabe versus real life that I have written about in my Roads to the Top article that I highly encourage you to check out. I will leave a link for it. So then we had MJF come out to cut a heat promo and spends a few minutes running down Darby Allin, says he's too afraid to show up and fight him, blah, blah, blah. Standard old school heel stuff, but it was well done. He eventually has Wardlow drag out the high estrogen level referee to count Darby out. And, of course, the lights go out and Sting makes his grand appearance. Just to make sure that you all remember, in the year 2021, Sting is still 10 times the star of the AEW roster than anyone combined. And, I figured this would be Sting's opportunity to wrestle MJF on the television show. I mean, Sting could really use the rub at this stage in his career, am I right? Got to get that young talent over. Maybe another day. We had a brief kerfluffle backstage with Anna Jay and Britt Baker. You know the drill. Take a drink. Again, because every fucking backstage segment on this show has to end in mass pandemonium and brawling. Punk's right, man. Stay in the seats, people. Much safer. Oh, and the hits keep on coming here. Not only did I get to see the Beta Bucks wrestle a shitty match on TV this week, I got to watch Penelope Ford wrestle a shitty match on my TV this week. And I love Tony Schiavone trying to draw attention away from the match with small talk about the upcoming Hose tournament for the new belt. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you guys need to go check out some of the recent articles about the font of the TBS title. Which is actually kind of funny on the surface because, like, you can't even really blame AEW for it. It literally is just the TBS logo. So, you might want to hit up the company instead of AEW for the logo problem. But I'm telling you, man, Jim Cornette's right. Once you see it, you will never unsee it again. And, by the way, all the people that are up in arms about that on the Reddit forums are the same AEW cockstrokers that can't take a surface level joke, so take their input with a grain of salt. But if you need a good laugh, you should go read those articles. We had the most epic Miro promo that not only was the highlight of the entire show, but probably deserves a fucking Emmy for its performance. God has forsaken Miro by stripping him of the TV title, and now God has two choices. He can either give Miro the strength to take back his title, or he will feel the wrath of Miro. And I know God is an almighty, all-powerful being, but even God should understand his 11th commandment. Thou shalt not piss off Miro. Love this segment. Just makes me sad when I realize after the fact that there's no way in hell Miro's winning back that belt. At least anytime soon. Oh yeah, Hangman Adam Page is back too. I completely forgot about that until the literal segment that he showed up to cut a promo. And this is the same guy that is apparently main eventing the Full Gear pay-per-view for the world title. His big triumphant return to TV last week and doesn't even show up until hour 2. Wasn't even mentioned in the show until hour 2, at least looking back at it now. Now that said, his promo was great. It was a very old school, fiery babyface promo where Page basically talked about starting up AEW with his group of friends, how they eventually drifted apart with everyone having different career visions. Talked about how he failed to become the first AEW World Champion, and he subsequently lost a lot of steam and drive. Said the one thing he didn't lose at all along the way was the fans chanting cowboy shit. Said he had to learn to leave old friends behind and move on to new friends. Which, by the way, he never mentioned the Dark Order here, so I think even Adam Page recognizes what a bunch of goons those guys are. Talks about his newborn son for a bit. Congratulations, Mr. Page, on that as well. Says that he's going to give everything at the Full Gear pay-per-view, including cowboy shit. Kinky. Great promo, though. Definitely got me invested to see him in Omega for the world title. Still not 100% convinced he's winning at the pay-per-view, but did a hell of a job selling it. And that is all you can ask for. And that brought us to our main event of Bobby Fish versus Bryan Danielson. And I like both guys here. They're straight shooters. They know how to work. They're not worried about trying to pop the fans' nuts. It's probably why I respect them so much. But they had a good match. Very simple story with both guys doing the feel-out process for a while. Fish ended up posting Danielson's knee and working that over. I love that top rope Falcon Arrow Fish does. I never saw him do that in WWE. I just wish it'd be like a finish instead of a signature move that guys kick out of. And the finish was both guys trying to grab a hold of each other's leg, but Danielson escapes the grip, locks in the heel hook on Fish, and gets him to tap out. Definitely not as good of a match as the Danielson Suzuki match was the previous night, but still a good little TV main event nonetheless. And of course, this was used to set up the Eliminator Tournament brackets, which consists of the following names: Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, Lance Archer, Dustin Rhodes, Powerhouse Hobbs, Orange Cassidy, and 10. No, not Ty Dillinger. The Dark Order guy. Well, one of these names is not like the others now, is it? Quite frankly, two of them really don't fit the bill for me, but at least Orange Cassidy's won a match on television in the last 6 months. But 10? Not even like Stu Grayson or Evil Uno? Fucking 10? I mean, I know he'll get eliminated in the first round, but you can't just throw Pac or Andrade in there for name power. Or fucking, God forbid, Adam Cole. Jesus Christ. Cody? Malachi Black? CM Punk? Oh my God. Whatever. I won't harp on it too much. The whole thing's just a foregone conclusion anyway. So, damn, how do I even judge this show? Love the last few segments of the night. That Dynamite Miro pre-tape. The promo from Page was great. And the main event with Danielson and Fish was very good. The other 70% of the show was kind of status quo, if I'm being blunt. A lot of Crash TV garbage, goofy hokey skits, the usual god-awful women's match that goes way too long. Going the other way, the typical men's match where everyone's more worried about getting their shit in than actually learning how to construct a competent pro wrestling match. See the Bucks. And again, I reiterate it. I know I mentioned it in the end of the Rampage recap, but nothing announced for the Full Gear card aside from the world title match and the finals of the Eliminator tournament. And I know it's probably not a big deal for some people out there, but sorry, I'm just so accustomed to how things used to be done in the wrestling business, where you just make the pay-per-view feel like it's the most important thing. And somehow wrestling has devolved into the polar opposite ideal now, where the television show it just takes priority over the pay-per-view. I mean, granted, this has kind of been a disease in the wrestling business, and since the honestly late 90s and WCW, but I figured they would at least learn valuable lessons, because WCW is dead. Apparently we still haven't caught up to that reality yet. And I know we still got a few weeks before the pay-per-view, but it would be really nice to get a general idea of what guys like Punk and Cole and Black are doing for that show. Danielson, I think it's pretty etched in stone based on the whole Eliminator tournament deal. Obviously he'll be wrestling in the finals, probably winning the entire thing. I'd love to see them start building Punk and Black. And I think Cole wrestling Jungle Boy again is pretty telegraphed at this point. But it's just the principle of getting it down on paper and letting your audience know, hey, here's what you're paying for in a few weeks. Instead of buy the pay-per-view and we'll construct a card on the go-home show after you've already purchased it. Just stupid. All right. And subsiding from the Crash TV element of the wrestling market to the good Christian TV end of the spectrum, let's talk about NWA Powerrr. Sal Rinauro and Mims versus Luke and PJ Hawks in the opener here. Kind of an interesting story they played up at the beginning. I vaguely recall the last Hawks Airy match I saw. I really didn't get the whole dynamic of PJ being the one to get the hot tag for Luke. Considering he's the younger, lesser experienced wrestler for the team. But here they pretty much did a role reversal, and I thought it was a much better decision. Luke controlled the action early on, tagged in PJ, who eventually got cut off and worked over for a pretty lengthy bit of time. They had a side angle where Danny Deals kept on getting on the apron to cause a distraction, and he eventually ended up getting ejected after like 3 attempts. They did the usual deal you see where PJ tries to get the desperation tag but gets intercepted. Eventually Luke does get the hot tag, and he's a house of fire for a little bit. I love that triple combo move he does where like he catches a guy in a fall-away slam position, gives him a backbreaker, hoists him up over his shoulder for the shoulder breaker, and then caps it off with the running power slam. And getting to the end here, the Hawks do some double teams for a minute. PJ actually makes a short comeback by himself on the heels and ends up forcing Ronaldo to tap out with the single leg crab. And in fact, this was a tournament match, and I think for the first time since the tournament began, we got graphics. Holy shit. It only took them until the semifinals to finally see the brackets, but better late than never, I guess. It was a good tag match, though. Kind of on the long side, but wasn't like G1 excruciating length. And I like the whole father-son duo they got with PJ and Luke. I think it'd be ideal if PJ didn't visibly tower over his dad by a good 2 or 3 inches, but you can't control height, I guess. Following this, we had Pope come out for a promo so he could share his thoughts on the upcoming championship opportunity. God, I think this championship opportunity bug in pro wrestling is worse than COVID. That's a joke, YouTube. God forbid I actually need to fucking clarify that. Anyway, Pope's promo was good. Not a whole lot to really note about it aside from the fact that he's got Trevor on his target list for the World Championship. And actually kind of made me sad in a way because in an ideal world, Pope should be a world champion. And I guess I still kind of hold that resentment over TNA from years back when they should have put the belt on him, but instead chose fucking Rob Van Dam instead. Assholes. We had something resembling a promo deal with Chelsea Green, Melina, and Kylie Ray. The Chelsea Green gimmick has such go-away heat with me. It's like Taryn Terrell level insufferable at this point. I don't know what you said. I hit the mute button. I couldn't take it. Although I did kind of chuckle at Melina trying to keep a straight face in the background during that whole tirade. Melina and Kylie's promos were promos. Like I said last week, Kylie Ray actually starting to grow on me a little bit. She's like a total Bayley knockoff, but she's at least entertaining. And she can actually work too, so she gets brownie points with me. Up next, we had probably the biggest WTF moment I think I've seen in wrestling all year. It was supposed to be Tyrus defending his TV title against Jordan Clearwater, and because both guys are part of the same faction, they spent the first 2 minutes of the 6:05 time limit running down the clock with both guys stalling and standing around doing nothing. It was not like Goldberg-Lesnar WrestleMania 20 stalling, but still didn't make for particularly compelling television. So, of course, the immediate question that comes to mind is, why was the match booked to begin with? Well, I don't know. And above all else, what really didn't make sense to me was that not only did they spend the first 2 minutes of the match running down the clock, but then Jordan ended up taking the fight to Tyrus anyway. Then they had a relatively boring squash deal where Tyrus ended up kicking Jordan's ass and beating him anyway. Very strange segment. Based on the promo he did afterwards, I guess the idea was to paint the visual that if Tyrus would be willing to do that to a friend, like imagine what he'd be capable of doing when he goes up against Scion. Oh yes, Scion, by the way, that I am yet to see on the show, even though Tyrus keeps mentioning him every week. So you go figure that one out. Oh, and apparently, just to further validate that kayfabe is truly dead, we also learned here that Tyrus and Trevor Murdoch are cousins. And I did laugh when Trevor called that out, by the way. So following this, we had this grand Mickie James announcement. She talked about the Powerrr pay-per-view and how it was one of, and I quote here, the greatest pay-per-views of all time. I think the highest grossing wrestling events and top box office draws would highly dispute that ideology, but I'll let Mickie slide there for her passionate but wrong opinion. Anyway, she took a minute to promote the women's show. They're going to be debuting soon. And this all led to Kiera Hogan coming out to basically whine, bitch, and moan that Mickie didn't book her for the show. She essentially took like 5 minutes to get under Mickey's skin and claim that she wants a match with her. And apparently this conversation was not on the quote format, so it eventually ended with Mickie telling Kiera that they can handle this issue in the back. Come again? Like, the whole concept of this segment was so stupid. Mickie is disappointed in Kiera because she wants a match with her? What the fuck? It's a yes-no question, Mickie. Why is this a conversation that needs to be held in private? You think Mickey's self-aggrandizing enough? Good lord. So then we had a Tom Latimer promo, which, well, looking back, was probably the best thing on the entire show. He basically just spent a few minutes giving some background on his story with Nick Aldis. Talked about how they grew up in the business together, but how Aldis always managed to make more income than him. Talked about whenever Aldis got signed to TNA in the States, Tom got left in the UK while Aldis used him as a career stepping stone. And it all pretty much culminated with him telling Aldis that he wants him to take a long look at his son and explain to him why Daddy's a loser and a failure. Classic heel stuff. Damn, I forgot how good a promo Tom was. Guess it kind of helps when he's not fucking Bram and acting like George the Animal Steel every week. But I am actually really looking forward to that match. I presume they're booking it for the pay-per-view in a couple weeks, which makes sense on a surface level. Although, considering the gravity of the injury angle from last week, I would probably want to keep all this off of TV for a longer period to really milk the angle. And just to demonstrate who the real greatest promo in the business is today, Cowboy James Storm comes out and cuts a fiery babyface promo, which was fantastic. And he didn't even say all that much, just he will once again become the NWA national champion. And he kind of blew off the whole Judas deal from last week, so I guess that program is done. Okay? Thanks for coming, Judas. Anyway, I think that brings us straight to our main event here with Aaron Stevens and Kratos versus The End in the semifinals match. And again, they're running with the theme of Aaron, kind of being off his game and Kratos trying to get him to refocus himself on being a badass again. The End worked over Aaron for a lot of it. Kratos ended up getting a hot tag and having a pretty fun hoss fight exchange with Pero. And that whole deal lasted until Pero started mocking Aaron on the apron and causing the ref to get distracted to keep him in his corner. And that's when Odison ran in and drop kicked Kratos from behind. I actually kind of like that heat spot. Brief heel beatdown on Kratos until a very shocking finish deal here where, honestly, I don't think I've ever seen this before, at least nothing I can recall off the top of my head. But Kratos eventually tags back in Aaron, Pero tags in Odinson, and Aaron immediately goes for a clothesline but gets rolled up and pinned with a schoolboy. Clean, by the way. At least I think it was clean. It looked like Otison's left hand was using the mat for leverage, so I don't think he had a handful of tights or anything. And then the show just kind of abruptly ended with Kratos shoving Aaron on the outside and, blowing up on him. Kind of an intriguing finish idea there. And I do like the story they're culminating with both these guys right now. I presume the end game is to eventually have them recapture the tag titles at some point down the line. I think it'd be too predictable for them to do the partner split and feud deal. We've seen it 1,000 times in wrestling. I don't really think the idea of Kratos, Aaron Stevens feuding is all that compelling. I think the real catch here is seeing the character development they're building with Aaron. And he's at least talented enough to get over something like that in the long haul. But yeah, man, pretty good show. I think the pay-per-view is next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or is it this coming Sunday? Gotta look that up. By any means necessary. October 24th. Yep, that is this Sunday. Cool. But, not really sure if I'm behind the name of the show. Kind of just screamed, by any means necessary. Yeah, that screams out, be prepared for a lot of heels to go over on this show. But I really dig a lot of the stories they're developing right now. I'm totally down for Pope and Trevor for the world title. I know they got that cage match planned with Jack Stain and Crimson. The Nick Aldis-Tom Latimer feud sounds enticing. Yeah, man, they got a lot of good stuff they're hyping up right now. I know they don't have the full lineup announced yet, and hopefully that'll be set in stone by next Tuesday's Go Home show, but that should be a fun show to check out. And like you could see here, the polar opposite of what AEW is doing. It's like NWA has a clear direction. They're building up programs. You can clearly see what they're going to be constructing for a card, and I get invested in that. I don't know why this is such a hard concept for wrestling companies to get behind anymore. Because WWE does the same thing. NXT, whatever you want to, same basic premise. Let's have pay-per-views every 4 or 5 weeks or whatever, and then let's wait until the go-home show to announce the card. No one's going to get invested in that. But NWA goes about it the right way, so hats off to them. I really like the NWA 73 pay-per-view, especially that main event with Aldis and Murdoch for the world title, so I'm expecting something comparable with By Any Means Necessary. Yeah, it just doesn't roll off the tongue like one might expect. Anyway, guys, if you want to support the 5 Starr Wrestling Report going forward, make sure you subscribe, comment, and rate the video for me. Make sure you check out my content on the Chairshot by heading on over to www.chairshot.com. Click under that opinion tab at the top of the page, and my work will always be listed under the name Star. I will be back on Friday for the NXT report and the last bit of reporting for the G1 Climax. That show will probably be very New Japan heavy, just because I would like to at least share my general thoughts about the whole tournament and honestly just give my perspective on where I stand with the product right now and where I think New Japan stacks up on the wrestling pyramid. Even if you aren't a fan of New Japan or haven't been following the G1, I do highly encourage you to check out that show for that conversation alone, because I think it'll be quite insightful. Plus, you'll get to hear me rant about NXT, and who doesn't love that? Until then, take care, all. Peace out.